And
Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to
something else.
something else, Daddy.
This is Nickel Matata, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Genie, and you're listening to something else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 264 of Something Else. Feast your heroes in this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 80 from January 28th, 2004. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the Gene Siskel to my Richard Roper. It's Cindy. Cindy, how the hell you doing today?
Since when am I skinny as a rail and dead?
Roper's not dead, is he? Or did I call you Siskel?
You called me Siskel.
Well, I don't know. I literally had to mute the show during the intro because I needed to hack up a lung. So I forgot who I was going to say. So I just looked down at my sheet
Touchdown
and saw
Seahawks!
Richard
Yeah!
Roper.
Let's go, boys! Let's go!
It's that show, ladies and gentlemen. So, NWA TNA number 80. What are you yeah. What are you up to this day?
Watching the Seahawks squash the Rams and hopefully go to the Super Bowl.
Well, if it's a squash match, then it's pretty obvious who goes over here, unless we're like booking PJ Polacco against Ted DiBiase or something. Then there might be an upset here.
There might be an upset. I have a feeling. But I gotta still believe, right? I mean,
I still believe in Joe Hendry, so there's that.
You'll probably see him at the Blood Money Rumble.
I don't know who I am, but I will certainly not be watching
Nor I.
anything of the sort. But yeah, that is this Saturday, as I predicted Friday on the Spot Show, and I've been predicting since like October that Gunther is going to win the Royal Rumble. That is my prediction. However, there's two things to keep in mind. First of all, I am really shitty at predictions. And secondly, I did predict Jey Uso would win last year. So there is that. But any predictions? Who do you think is going to win?
Let's see. For the men's Rumble, I was going to go Gunther. For the women's Rumble, I think Becky Lynch loses the IC title but wins the Rumble.
Is she even wrestling otherwise on the show?
She could lose it on Raw.
She could just win the Rumble and still be the champion. So, anywho, let's dive into TNA here. Before we dive into it, I'd like to tell you what else is happening in the world of TNA. Now, there is a fairly famous angle on this show, which we will get to, along with the direct feedback from the person's employer that's involved in this show. However, let's talk about the media. This is the episode. This is the Brian Urlacher episode. I think, most people who are wrestling fans are at least aware of this angle and are aware of the feedback. But why would TNA do an angle like this? Obviously for the media attention. Now, This angle does get a ton of media attention, and while a lot of it is just straight up negative, the one positive is the media that plugged it. They plugged TNA, they plugged Wednesday nights, and they plugged pay-per-view. So if they are going to get anything out of it, the media did note how you can see this TNA if you are interested at all. Now, despite that, despite the positive of them saying where you can watch the show and what this show is, the feedback otherwise was incredibly negative, with Richard Roper notably saying this was not on a WrestleMania. He was not working with stars like Bill Goldberg, Mick Foley, or Chris Benoit, but he was in TNA working with Don Callis, and then he called Johnny Fairplay the creepy, scrawny mophead from Survivor, best known for conning his fellow contestants into believing his grandmother had died. And then Roper also noted that when sports stars like Refrigerator Perry, Dennis Rodman, and Steve McMichael wrestled, it was for big time companies. So, yeah, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and then you have TNA. And then the other news is TNA has a new match that they are trying to make happen for the April 4th Bound for Glory show. And that is Jeff Jarrett versus Macho Man Randy Savage. This will not be the last time you hear us talk about Jeff Jarrett versus Randy Savage. And due to a combination of that and the very obvious involvement of everyone's good friend Vince Russo, this indicates that Hulk Hogan is officially done with TNA.
For the best, honestly.
Now, on to the show. Now, this show, we rarely, if ever, play any audio from this show. But there are two bits of audio that we will be playing. And the first is going to be the honest to God, legitimate opening to this week's show.
I was wondering if you're going to bring this up.
Let's go to the honest to God, legitimate opening of this week's show.
Talk about a very serious situation. It's cable satellite piracy. There's people out in America that get this cable program using cheater boxes and converters. You know who you are. Listen, I just want to ask you something. Do you mind if I come to your house and eat for free? Maybe take something out of the fridge? I don't think so. So let me ask you this. As we're putting our bodies on the line to entertain you guys and to support our families back home, would you do me a favor? If you enjoy the show, show us by telling all your friends and paying for it. It's a pay-per-view. We appreciate it. Our families appreciate it.
Now, Cindy, if one of your friends were coming over to your house and they were hungry and you had food in your refrigerator, would you let them have a sandwich?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Erik Watts doesn't have any friends. You know? But
knowing
yeah,
his reputation, that's probably true.
But Eric, if you want, you can come over to my house on Wednesdays. You can give me $5 and I'll pretend that I'm paying to watch this show. And obviously, TNA has apparently got it in their mind that the reason why they're losing their ass on these pay-per-views is because of cable TV piracy. That is the reason people aren't buying these fucking shows. No other reason.
Yeah.
Can't be because these shows suck.
And to be perfectly honest, I mean, this was 2004. I mean, we're almost at the point where a lot of the wrestling fans that were still around or still had an inkling were pretty much long gone. I mean, they have moved to either MMA. Boxing was enjoying a nice little resurgence around this point. And maybe NASCAR or the NFL. They weren't watching wrestling, and those Southern wrestling fans definitely weren't watching WWE.
And this show has had multiple times where they've drawn a pretty decent buy rate for one reason or another. And the fact is, they can't keep on to it because they keep booking shitty shows. And you can say, well, bro, you just don't get it, bro. Well, guess fucking what? It You need to fucking book it for the people so they can get it. Because the people who get it are fewer and fewer as the weeks go by. And it's not because they're all watching on illegal black cable boxes.
Which, by the way, were becoming more and more actually illegal
Well, they were never
around
legal
this
to
time.
begin with.
I know, but around this time, it was more digital cable was becoming a thing. So there were new boxes, and in various houses and everything, they were able to configure the outside hookups to where those boxes wouldn't work anymore.
No, you could still get them to work now. But anyway, the pre-show video this week included footage of the insane Clown Posse hanging out with their idiot friends from last week. Now, I will say this. I don't know the who, what, why, where, how, when of it, but the Juggalos did not hijack this week's show. I've got two theories. One is that they were basically told to knock it the fuck off. And the other is that they were told that, unlike last week, the Insane Clown Posse was actually going to be participating in this week's show, and thus, please fucking refrain from making the show all about you until the segment specifically designed to make the show all about you.
Sounds about
So
right.
A stretch limo was outside the ring, and Erik Watts got out with Goldylocks and Brian Urlacher before we got into the Macho Man Randy Savage rap video. And then here's a positive of this week's show. We were starting with a match, which is Abyss versus D'Lo Brown. And it's funny because when Abyss came out, and I didn't know who he was going to wrestle, but I was thinking, it would be an interesting match? Abyss versus D'Lo Brown. And then D'Lo Brown came out, and they've been doing the thing for a while now, where before before their music starts, they'll play a little bit of their video on the screen. And this time, it wasn't even a video. Well, it was a video, but it was D'Lo Brown cutting a promo about how Abyss injured his friend AJ Styles. I know they kind of made up last month, but they had a blood feud not even 6 months ago on this show.
They decided to put that aside because there's a bigger asshole than Vince Russo on the show now.
But still, when did AJ Styles make up to D'Lo and say, man, I'm sorry. Remember all those things I did to you and had my friends do to you? I'm sorry.
A couple of weeks ago, they understood it. It was part of the game.
Anyway, D'Lo ran to the ring and hit the ring to start the match. He set up a table outside the ring, which was immediately followed up with Abyss getting the heat. Abyss then adjusted the table, which led to D'Lo making his comeback. Maybe they should just ignore the fucking table. D'Lo gave Abyss the catatonic, and I had to laugh because normally when D'Lo does the catatonic, he finishes it with a backbreaker. But his mama didn't raise no fool. He is not that stupid. He was not going to give Abyss a backbreaker, a spinning backbreaker onto his knee. Abyss shoved referee Rudy Charles into the ropes when D'Lo went for the frog splash. Instead of that being a disqualification, Rudy just counted when Abyss then hit the black hole slam for the win. After the match, D'Lo grabbed Abyss by the hair, so Abyss gave him a choke slam through the aforementioned table. That is totally D'Lo's fault. Abyss was pretty much just going to walk to the back with D'Lo just grabbed his hair.
Yeah, but Abyss was also setting up the table, adjusting the table as well.
He didn't. It wasn't. The table's already adjusted. He was making no move. Yeah, he was standing there, but he made no move that indicated that he wanted to do anything to D'Lo Brown until D'Lo grabbed his hair. And then El Canotillo hit the ring to attack Abyss, throwing Abyss into the ring just so he could clothesline Abyss right back out of the ring. And I'll say this, these two had pretty decent chemistry, and I'll be honest, I think this could have been a pretty good feud had they gone with it, but they didn't. Instead, these two will only have one other televised singles match ever, and that's on an episode of Impact in 2013. And that's with D'Lo Brown of the Aces and Eights against Joseph Park. So I'm just going to spoil this now without having watched that match. That match will not be as good as this match was.
Probably not, no.
I gave this match a 5.0 out of 10.
I didn't like as much as you did, although I thought it was all right. I gave it a 4 out of 10. By the way, let me look this up. Yeah, he will be leaving for another wonderful All Japan tour.
Oh yeah, I mean that was pretty much the whole reason for this post-match angle.
Mm-hmm.
D'Lo's actually here, and I think we've mentioned this, but D'Lo's actually here until like July, which is a little surprising because I didn't think he lasted that long.
Yeah, he lasted into the Impact era. His last match for this run of TNA was losing to Monty Brown.
Brown versus Brown.
Yeah, he does appear on 2 episodes of Impact. But his last appearances against D'Lo Brown, we're not counting dark matches, by the way.
So it's like I can't even like blame D'Lo for this because like he got a pretty good gig with All Japan, which was almost undoubtedly paying him better than he was getting for one show a week with TNA. But you know, there's that little bit of D'Lo was another good match to have on the show. And he was somebody that could work in main events and, you know, be pretty much part of any part of the card and have it work. And unfortunately for us watching the show, he got a better gig. You know, good for him, but, you know, he got a better gig. Scott Hudson is now in Team Jarrett's locker room where he's on the phone with Tom T. Sr. Tom T says that if Brian Urlacher doesn't leave the arena right now, and it's important that we emphasize right now, then Erik Watts must forfeit his match and lose his job. Jarrett was then most excited, not excited that Erik Watts might lose his job. He was more excited that Mike Tenay and Brian Urlacher are going to be taken care of. Glenn Gilberti chimed in and said that he will take care of the goofy clowns and then confirmed that either Simon or Swinger signed the loyalty pledge. Why wouldn't he just tell Jeff Jarrett which one signed the fucking loyalty pledge?
Because that will tip off the other one that they've signed it.
But it doesn't
they
matter.
They know how Glenn works.
But why is this a mystery to Jeff Jarrett? It should not be a mystery to Jeff Jarrett as to who is on his team. Whatever, at this point. Talk about this next match.
All right, so it's for the X Division title. It is Chris Sabin versus Michael Shane. Now, as much crap as I give Michael Shane, he is a very capable wrestler. I hated his booking. You have him do what he does best and not have any of the fluke bullshit that goes around. He's a perfectly fine wrestler. As the case with this match with Chris Sabin. It was 10 minutes, or it felt like 10 minutes, of solid action. Some good back and forth. At the end, Sabin was going for the cradle shock, couldn't get it, but managed to hook Michael Shane up for the 3 to retain his title. Post-match, Shane Douglas and Michael Shane were arguing, but they managed to work everything out, and they're going to focus on something else. It was a good match. I gave it a 6 out of 10.
And they put up 3 fingers. And I guess Tracy technically counts as the third person, but Francine never counted when they put up 3 fingers in ECW.
Right.
By the way, in the pre-match promo, Sabin said that Shane won the first Ultimate X and he won the second Ultimate X. So now we have a tiebreaker. In order for it to be a tiebreaker, wouldn't this have had to have been an Ultimate X match?
Yeah.
By the way, a couple things here. Tracy had a giant cast on her arm after that bump she took last week where she latched onto Elix Skipper's back and fell through the chairs. What I thought was interesting, Shane Douglas was on commentary and they asked him about the Jeff Jarrett loyalty pledge. And he went off about how he's not going to sign the Jeff Jarrett loyalty pledge. He is on his own. Now, based on the story of this promotion right now, that should mean that Jeff Jarrett's going to go up to Shane Douglas and Michael Shane next. Spoiler, that isn't what happened. Like, again, this shit is fake, and Mike Tenay should have known enough to at least tip off Shane Douglas that he's going to ask a question like this so they could devise a storyline way for him to answer that, because otherwise he just looks like a dumbass. Actually, it makes Jeff Jarrett look like a dumbass because Jeff Jarrett's with us or against us. And even if Shane isn't with all the baby faces, by saying I'm not with Jeff Jarrett, you're against Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah. I don't know what the point of that question was. I know what the point of the question was. I just don't understand why. I mean, Shane Douglas is pretty smart. He could come up with a way to answer that without answering it, and he didn't. Honestly, I do feel that he did answer that question, but not in a verbal way.
So, by the way, at one point, whatchamacallit, Sabin, by the way, pulled it back the guardrail and did a springboard crossbody out of the ring onto Shane. And Douglas asked why that wasn't a DQ. And Don West said that was funny because, we only do DQs in street fights on this show.
Not only in street fights, but, cage matches and stuff like that.
Yeah. I thought this was actually one of the better X Division matches that we've had, one of the better non-gimmick X Division matches we've had, especially in the past 6 to 8 months. I gave this a 7.5 out of 10. And at this point, it's 35 minutes into the show. Can I just stop watching now?
Okay, there's a little bit of a valley, but there's a really good 8-man at the top of the hour.
No, there's not. But we'll get to that. So we got a replay of the AJ Styles Johnny Fairplay incident, and we get a pre-taped sit-down interview with Tenay and Johnny Fairplay, who was in a neck break.
I so did not miss these interviews.
Fairplay said that he came out and he showed respect to all the fans and the wrestlers, and then AJ assaulted him. He ripped on Rupert, saying nice guys finish 8th. Tenay brought up Roddy Piper, and Fairplay told him not to bring up Piper. At that point, a random PA brought Fairplay a red Solo cup of drink. Tenay finally asked him the question, what brings him to TNA? And Johnny Fairplay on this pay-per-view telecast told us that he brings TV ratings, which is so not helpful. And then he said that every week he's going to keep increasing the buy rate, and in 4 weeks, he's going to quadruple it. And at this point, I'm like, I bet Dixie believed that.
Oh, yeah, she definitely believed that. I also believe that Johnny Fairplay would order the pay-per-view about 6,000 times to double the buy rate. And then the next week, order it 12,000 times.
Oh, he's not that fucking stupid.
Oh, yes, he is.
No.
I mean...
he's not.
It reminded me... You remember the early episodes of South Park? The Jesus and Pals episode?
There were many
The
episodes
talk
of
show.
Jesus and Pals, but
Oh, the talk show episode where Jesus and Pals turned into like a Jerry Springer style show.
okay.
This reminded me of the line of Jimbo and Ned after their original Hunt and Killing show. We're told by the station manager, your ratings doubled from 6 to 12. 6 people watching to 12.
It's
That
also
reminds
public
me of TNA
access.
pay-per-views.
It's also public access. It's not. It's a joke that isn't even really a joke when it comes to public access. Um,
Well, TNA is not that far off from public access.
so Johnny Fairplay tells us that anytime he wants, he is going to have a talk show segment called Playing Fair with Johnny. And that led to me thinking of all the actual humorous things that we could have where we just have shitty matches on this show, and suddenly in the middle of a shitty match, Johnny Fairplay comes out to do his talk show segment instead. Like if Miss TNA Bruce was still here, we could have Bruce be interrupted every week by Johnny Fairplay doing his talk show segment.
And yet it would improve
That
the
would
show.
that would actually be funny. Anyway, Tenay brought up Piper's Pit and Fairplay walked off. After the show went off the air last week, the Sandman was smoking and complaining about losing to the Gathering 2 weeks in a row. He declared that he would bring in another partner next week.
Fuck you, Rams!
All right, because again, this is going to be one of those shows. Cindy, take it away.
Oh, I'm watching the NFC Championship game, that's why. And Smith of the Rams bobbled the punt reception. Fell,
fair,
touched
that
it, lost the ball. Yeah.
That wasn't what I was telling you to take from here.
Oh, match number 3 is the Gathering versus the Sandman. And, well, some music comes out, and it's Mikey Whipwreck. Now, if you know your wrestling history, and apparently Mikey Whipwreck didn't forget either, when he came out, he sided with Father James Mitchell because Mikey was managed by James Mitchell when he was not only in ECW, but also in MLW around this point. If you remember last week's match, just replace everything with Balls Mahoney with Mikey Whipwreck. Got it? Good. You have this match. Mikey kind of messes up a dive on Julio, and the Gathering take advantage, and they do a demolition decapitation on Sandman to win. This was okay, I guess. I mean, it was fine. Sandman didn't embarrass himself like he sometimes does. I gave it a 2 out of 10.
This wasn't Mikey fucking up a dive. This was a planned spot where he went for a dive. Julio moved and he crashed into the barricade. But then, yes, it became every Gathering versus Sandman match we've had. The Gathering beat his ass and then pinned him clean. And then we got another Raven video saying, "I'm watching you, devil." Now, I would like to complain about these tag matches being short, but no one in the planet needs the Sandman to go any longer. And although it's weird seeing him becoming the jobber of the millennium to get over the Gathering, Punk and Julio deserve the push, and the money feud is them against Raven, so Punk and Julio should be going over strong. But of course, this is TNA, the company that's allergic to making money, so when they do something smart, it just makes your head explode. And the match, 1.5 out of 10.
And I don't think this is any shock to anybody. Mikey Whipwreck is one and done. However, I do understand the shot because Mikey Whipwreck is responsible for training some very prominent people at this time in TNA.
That's not why he was brought in. You said this to me on Facebook yesterday. That's not why he was brought in. It wasn't because he trained the SAT. It had nothing to do with him training Trinity. It was because Sandman keeps bringing in ECW people, his friends from ECW, to take on the Gathering, and he keeps losing.
I said I understood why they're doing that and why they got Mikey. Because he's worked with all these guys.
Scott Hudson is now with Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger. The TNA powers that be have decided that they will be handcuffed to Gilberti and David Young in the main event. Both deny signing the Jeff Jarrett loyalty pledge, and these babyfaces argued over who signed it. You know, instead of being like, we're friends, we wouldn't turn on each other. Anyway, Simon told Erik Watts he didn't have to worry about Gilberti or Young. If I am Erik Watts, I'd have Glenn Gilberti and David Young at the bottom of the list of people I'd be worried about.
David Young's at the bottom of this. Glenn is kind of competent. David Young isn't.
And yes, we're going to have plenty of Glenn Gilberti and David Young to talk about on this show. Before we get to that, we have a famous segment, the famous segment. Don Callis is in the ring with the RedShirts and Johnny Fairplay, calling out Brian Urlacher, who 20 minutes ago was banned from the building. Urlacher came out to one of the biggest pops on the show. Callis reiterated what Tom T. Sr. said, and apparently we're informed here that Urlacher does have a time limit. He just has to leave the arena before the main event, which, whatever. So Callis explained that Urlacher could do things the easy way or the hard way. The easy way was for him to tuck his tail between his legs and run away, and the hard way was apparently for the RedShirts to attack him. Urlacher got sent into the ropes where he almost fell through the ropes and onto his head, but he ducked a double clothesline, hit a pair of clotheslines of his own, and then heaved Johnny Fairplay out of the ring onto the RedShirts, who had bailed. Callis had extra bailed because he was nowhere to be seen here. Okay. So, according to Erik Watts, and Erik Watts was trying to defend this to the media who were complaining, Urlacher trained and practiced this spot like 20 times, and even then he still fucked it up when it was time for the show. But apparently he practiced this spot 20 times, and Watts said the only way he could have gotten hurt is if he would have strained a muscle lifting up Johnny Fairplay, which is so not true. You don't think people can get hurt throwing a clothesline? You don't think people can get hurt? He nearly fell through the fucking ropes. And let's just say the Chicago Bears were pissed here. And as TNA will somehow forget in about 3.5 years, it is in the NFL players' contracts that they are prohibited from participating in any activity that exposes him to a significant injury risk. And the Bears, of course, considered this a violation of that. Urlacher's defense was he didn't think this was a violation. Regardless of how carefully choreographed something is, people have gotten injured running the ropes. People have gotten injured giving clotheslines, and people have gotten hurt giving a press slam. All for a segment that was over as fast as it began and required me to press pause before the next segment so I could write all of this out. And the thing is, if Urlacher had been injured here, the Bears could have cut him for violating his contract. And while, yes, someone would have signed him at some point, they would have signed him to a 1-year deal for a shit amount as opposed to whatever he was making. I think he just signed a pretty decent contract at this point. So he would have given all that up so he could do a funny little angle on TNA one week. And needless to say, he does not make a return appearance.
Yeah, this is another one and done. I mean, how many one and dones have we seen?
This is episode 80, so about 205.
Right. And yeah, he did. Yeah, here's the deal that he just signed. This is his 2003 to 2010 contract. when the Bears renegotiated the contract after the 2002 season, where he set a whole bunch, where he was in line to be Defensive Player of the Year. Now, this is 2003 money. 9 years, 56 million, 13 million guaranteed. 13 million signing bonus. That's pretty darn good.
And the Chicago Bears wouldn't have had to pay out a penny of that if he got injured doing this angle.
I mean, he was in there with Northcutt and Legend. I mean, they're capable wrestlers.
That doesn't matter. You can still get in. Like I said, he almost fell through the ropes. You can get injured hitting somebody with a clothesline. It does not matter how capable Kevin Northcutt and Joe Legend are. He could have injured his arms doing the move.
Meh.
All right. But yeah, so we will never see Brian Urlacher again. And yeah. Scott
Great
Hudson
one off,
now with
but that's all it was good for.
Scott Hudson was now with Jerry Lynn and the rest of Team TNA for the America's X Cup. Lynn calls AAA the best Mexico has to offer, but they're the best NWA TNA has to offer, and they're going to go out and watch their upcoming competition. Lynn said that he would be handcuffed to Kid Cash in the main event. All right.
Talk about get this the roar that he gave at the end.
It's Jerry Lynn. He roars every time he talks. Talk about this pre-match angle.
So to set everything up, match 4, it's Chad Collier, Matt Striker, Shark Boy, and Eric Young versus Team AAA, Hector Garza, Hoofdo Guerrero, Aguila, and Abismo Negro. However, before Team AAA came out, Kid Cash tried to get Borash to sign the loyalty oath. He essentially tells him to fuck off. No way, no how is he signing that thing. Kid Cash tries to really go after Borash, however, Job Squad 3.542 decided to swarm around Borash, and Kid Cash realized 4 against 1. I'm a star. But Shark Boy is very popular. I don't like my odds, so I'm going to bail and I'm going to beat up Tiny the Timekeeper. He goes after Tiny. Sarah Lee, the ticket taker lady, has her trusty broom and sweeps him away. Tiny takes a couple of shots before Black Shirt Security breaks everything up. Kid Cash fails to getting Jeremy Borash to sign the loyalty oath. Okay, this is the last night of this angle of Kid Cash getting people to sign the loyalty oath. And this is the last point of Kid Cash's loyalty oath stuff. Before, the reveal of who signed the loyalty oath, Simon Diamond or Johnny Swinger. I didn't care for this angle.
And it is important to note that the non-AAA people were all still standing in the ring while all this was going on. And it wasn't that Kid Cash was outnumbered 4-on-1. It's that he tried to bully someone weaker than him. And when everyone stood up to him, he's a bully, so he backed down. But however, because again, he's a bully, he went after somebody weaker than him, Tiny the Timekeeper again. And so he was assaulted by an old lady. Kid Cash is becoming the MVP of this show.
Most
Now,
valuable prick.
now, Team AAA was not just here for the hell of it. They taped half of the World X Cup show tonight, and then they're taping the other half next week for the pre-taped February 11th pay-per-view. And with that, Tenay finally explained the formatting of the X Cup, which is going to be 4 singles matches, 2 tag matches, and an 8-man tag. And he tells you to go to the website for the points and the rules. Now, while it would be nice if they told us what the individual matches would be, I'm like, you know what? We have a week before the show. We have 2 weeks before the show. They can tell us next week, and I give it a pass because we don't need to have it drilled into our heads today what the matches in 2 weeks are.
Yep, save it
We
all
have
for
a
next
nice
week.
we have a nice general idea of what it is now. All right. Now, by the way, they did show us the America's X Cup trophy, which I am 99% sure is the same trophy they use right now as the Call Your Shot Gauntlet trophy, just with a different nameplate on the front. So I guess it's
Which
not what
I'm
you
pretty
make, it's what
sure
you
is
save.
also the X Division, the
No,
original X Cup trophy from 2003, and also the Mr. TNA trophy that AJ Styles had
nope.
3 weeks ago.
No, that thing was fucking 6 feet tall. Like this is the cup on top of a wooden block thing. Like Super X Cup and the Mr. TNA trophy were 6 feet tall. Like this thing was just sitting on the desk and was not even taller than Tenay and West while they were sitting down. So this match, it this was a poorly booked match. This was what this should have been. If these are the 4 guys you're going to put Team AAA in against, this should have been 95% Team AAA doing really cool moves to them. Because here's the fact the other Matt Striker, Chad Collier, Eric Young, and Shark Boy have a combined 2 wins on pay per view. They do not need to be getting, this is a 7-minute match. They did not need to be taking 4 minutes of offense in this fucking match. And if you wanted to have a competitive match, these are not the 4 guys they should be having. It should have been whatever the 4 lowest tier X guys that actually occasionally win on the show is, which, by the way, ironically, if they were to do that, 2 of the people that would be included would be an Elix Skipper and Sanjay Dutt. But still, it's like this was not the right match. Hector Garza, Juventud Guerrera, Mr. Aguila, and Abismo Negro are responsible for drawing a pay-per-view in 2 weeks. And all this told me was they're worse than the people who are never booked on the show, and when they do, they lose. And eventually it broke down into a dive sequence. And back in the ring, Aguila pinned Eric Young with a shooting star press. After the match, Team TNA got in the ring and we got an 8-way handshake. And honestly, this wasn't even like a party match. Like they literally had an American style for the time 8-man tag match, and not even a very good one at that. And then he did a couple dives at the end and called it, and he went to the finish. This did not inspire anybody to buy that show in 2 weeks. 4.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 6 out of 10. I actually like this match quite a bit. I mean, I just thought it was more interesting than what we've had previously for this style. And I just liked it. I don't really have an explanation. I just liked it. As Arya seethes in the background, wishing that Trey were here.
Tell us about Scott Hudson talking to Trinity.
So, Scott Hudson's with Trinity. She calls Siaki brain dead for not signing the loyalty oath. Also sideswipes Scott Hudson and touchdown Seahawks. Meanwhile, she also said she signed with Jeff Jarrett because she wants to be with somebody who's going places, like Jeff Jarrett, and not with somebody who's going nowhere, like Saisiaki. And she also sideswipes Kid Cash and saying, "We all know those beans don't bake." So Trinity knows that Kid Cash had a vasectomy or something. Anyway, Sonny Siaki comes out and says that that Sonny Siaki is going to be handcuffed to Trinity. No, she's not, because Kid Cash jumps Sonny Siaki and handcuffs him to one of those hanger pole things on the rack in the fake faux lockers that they have.
Now, literally, the only part of this stupid storyline that makes sense is that Sonny Siaki, who is like he's the most consistently arrogant jerk in the history of this show, and has now somehow turned babyface. The only part that makes sense is that in a year and a half, he has never been on Jeff Jarrett's team. In fact, he's almost consistently on the side that's against Jeff Jarrett. So even though I doubt that part will ever get brought up as part of the show, it actually makes sense as to why Sonny Siaki would not be one of the people who are suddenly sucking up to Jeff Jarrett. Like, it makes sense that Glenn Gilberti, who is a giant suck up, would be teaming with Jeff Jarrett now that, even though 6 months ago he was trying to take Jarrett's title. But by the way, much like how, oh yeah, and the best part was Siaki, like, this was all his fucking fault too, because we get told he's gonna be handcuffed to Trinity later in the show, but he goes into the thing to grab her, to handcuff her now, and that's when he gets attacked and did that. There was literally no reason why he had to be handcuffed to her right now, and he couldn't just fucking wait for that part of the show.
That's Sonny Siaki think with his head, not his correct head.
So
oh care. God, this.
3 Live Crew versus the RedShirts for the World Tag Team Championship. Apparently, last week on Explosion, Kid Cash informed the RedShirts that if they did not win the tag team titles, then they would be fired. Which, it's still hilarious to me that it's become the gimmick that Legend is also a security guard. So even though he came onto the show as a wrestler, we were told about his wrestling background. Apparently, if he gets fired from here, he will have no choice but to go work as security somewhere else. Now, we have talked about for weeks the ongoing list of injuries that Kevin Northcutt received as a bouncer. And we have a new injury to add to that list, and that being that he has a bullet in his arm from being shot at as a bouncer. TNA is missing out on a money angle by not bringing back Puppet the Psycho Dwarf to pull a gun on Northcutt and have Northcutt dare him to pull the trigger. It could lead to the first ever gun on a pole match, where you have a normal sized pole for Northcutt to climb and a smaller pole for Puppet to climb. This, by the way, was more interesting than 3 Live Crew versus the RedShirts, because, as always, they got the heat on R-Truth, making BG James do the hot tag comeback, which is the exact opposite of what they should be doing here. Outran Michael, Shane, and Tracy for some reason, which did more to distract Conan than anything else. BG went to anally penetrate Kevin Northcutt, but Shane Douglas ran in and clonked BG with a chain-assisted punch to the head, and Northcutt got the pin to win the titles. Now, there are two positives to this. First, 3 Live Crew were... What?
There are positives to this?
Yes. First, 3 Live Crew were barely on the show as champions anyway, so whether or not anyone actually wants to see them as champions The red shirts are on the show every week, so it puts the tag titles back in a prominent position. And secondly, it sets up a feud with 3 Live Crew versus Shane and Shane, which could at the very least be an interesting little feud. And I gave this match a 3.0 out of 10.
0 out of 10. Fuck this match. The Red Shirts essentially Luigi their way to the titles. And the match would have been better if it was Shane Douglas and Michael Shane. They have 3 Live Crew beat the Red Shirts because they're not around for much longer either. And just have the feud be 3 Live Crew versus Shane Douglas and Michael Shane, saying that, hey, I didn't like what you said about me in the video, which was also the sign where Shane Douglas was like, yeah, I'm siding with Jarrett. So to show that, I'm going to screw over guys that rejected you in 3 Live Crew. And I think that's a match you would see. 3 Live Crew versus Shane and Shane. And just have BG and Shane Douglas do minimal stuff and have the bulk of the work be Ron Killings and Michael Shane.
Scott Hudson was now with the Sandman, who was on his big ass Nokia phone. And he is bringing in Terry Funk next week, which, if nothing else, makes me interested in seeing how Sandman loses in 3 minutes next week. Problem with bringing in Funk for this match is just that. As we mentioned earlier, this feud is not about getting the Sandman over. It's about putting Punk and Julio over to build to their match, to build to their feud with Raven. But they're spending the money to bring in Terry Funk for this match, which again, it should culminate with Punk and Julio just going over. And I mean, Terry Funk, who was never balked at losing to anybody, like, for instance, Public Enemy did not get over beating Terry Funk because Terry Funk was barely advertised a week ahead of time. It was a big deal, when this shit happens. This is why you get people over with wins and losses. But it's TNA. They don't understand anything.
Nope. And I'm trying to. I thought Raven was injured, but I was looking it up. Guess what Raven was doing around this time?
Don't really know.
Doing MLW, doing Free PW, where he actually beat the Sandman in a title match. And he'll be back soon, I guess.
All right. Tell us about this insane Clown Posse angle.
Okay, so I don't hate this angle as much as Arya does. So Mike Tenay is in the ring with ICP, and you can tell that Violent J is really, really high. But he does put over Mike Tenay's insane knowledge of wrestling. Like, he called him a real one and essentially told him that don't question the jugglers. It's a lifestyle you kind of don't understand. And Tenay's like, yeah, I probably don't want to understand as well. So the reason that ICP is here because he's watched the show and noticed that there are juggalos in the audience. So they decided, you know what? Let's go. Let's go check it out. I mean, it's
Okay, great.
idiot.
So,
Sorry. Unsportsmanlike conduct,
okay,
taunting
out,
penalty.
out came
Mm.
Glenn Gilberti and David Young. Gilberti said he, Callis, and Jarrett are big fans of Insane Clown Posse and that they and Bozo are his favorite clowns. He demanded an apology for their actions next week. Violent J brought up the random guy who was there with them without clown makeup, and he's apparently Too Tough Tony, who was the JCW champion, which then ended in a fight where David Young knocked out the JCW champion with one punch, and then ICP cleared the ring of Gilberti and Young. And I've literally got a cold over here. I'm not just asking you to talk because I decided this is the week you need to talk for 60% of the show.
Right.
So Violent J booked a tag match with them against Gilberti and Young for next week. Why are they able to book their own matches? Plus, The Gathering versus the Sandman and Terry Funk, and El Canyotillo versus Abyss. Scott Hudson is now with Eric
that's
Watts.
Not bad. I'm kind of fine with, they're mixed up with low card guys. They're not going with main eventers, so that's fine.
Scott Hudson was now with Eric Watts. Hudson said this was one-on-one. Nothing says one-on-one like a match with a dozen guys at ringside. Watts said that Callis sucks. He is so confident that he is winning this match that he is booking Jeff Jarrett in a world title match next week, and that Jeff Jarrett, the world champion, does not need to know who his opponent is. And by the way, America's Most Wanted, in their first appearance on the show, showed up here at the end to stand next to Eric Watts. Because, yeah, after that Insane Clown Posse segment, we had no AJ Styles on this show, no America's Most Wanted on this show, but we had a 10-minute ICP segment. So then we go to our main event. Eric Watts versus Don Callis in a loser loses power match. Callis, who, by the way, has not wrestled on national television since Guilty as Charged 2001, came to the ring wearing a 5-star robe along with actual wrestling gear. Watts, who wrestles on Explosion every fucking week, as we mentioned like 2 weeks ago when he was in the main event of the show, doesn't have gear and just wrestles in a baggy shirt and jeans. So we were informed.
Kind of been his gear since '99.
By the way, we mentioned there's going to be lumberjacks. Well, not even lumberjacks. Everyone's going to be at ringside handcuffed to each other. The bell rang and nobody was at ringside. So after the bell rang, we then went backstage to where all the people were being handcuffed to each other. We were informed that D'Lo Brown will not be here because of Abyss chokeslamming him through a table. So Abyss will now be handcuffed to Don Harris. And then Jeff Jarrett ran out and he neutralized the real threat to this match as he ran to the announce desk and handcuffed Mike Tenay to the guardrail. Because, of course, he did. We're informed that Watts handcuffed Jarrett to the guardrail instead of to El Canyotillo like he was supposed to be. But either Watts really fucking sucks at handcuffing people, or Mike Tenay didn't actually see what he thinks he saw because he just was handcuffed to El Leon by the end of this match. So this match wasn't total shit. As expected, they had enough crazy and wacky stuff going on to distract you from the fact that there wasn't a whole lot going on in this match. They fought into the crowd. Apparently, this was an unannounced Falls Count Anywhere match because Watts backdropped Callis on the ramp and covered him and got a 2 count. Watts missed a big boot by about 10 feet that Callis sold. Watts went for a chokeslam, but Callis whacked the referee. Trinity ran down and gave Watts a moonsault. The Naturals ran down to unhandcuff everyone before the match was over. And this is where it got bullshitty here because there was too much happening. Like, during the match, they had a decent amount of stuff going on to distract you from Watts and Callis. But then at the end, there was just too much shit going on. They ran out of time because the Naturals ran down and unhandcuffed everyone. We didn't really see what the hell was going on. The only thing you saw after the match was James Storm handcuffed to the guardrail. Where the hell was everybody else? Who fucking knows? And then, let's see, what the hell else happened here? Watts powerbombed Trinity in the ring and then went for a chokeslam to Callis. However, Goldilocks was randomly in the ring, and I will let Don West take it from here.
Goldilocks, you whore! What were you doing?
80 episodes of this show were almost worth it for Goldilocks, you whore. And Callis whacked Watts with the NWA title, made the cover, and got the win. And Don Callis is now in charge of TNA, which, again, if this isn't his last episode, it's almost his last episode. Angry Mike Tenay called Goldilocks a bitch, and the heels celebrated in the ring. Other than Don West calling Goldilocks a whore, the highlight of this match was Kid Cash bumping like a madman for Jerry Lynn outside the ring. Again, Kid Cash is very quickly becoming the MVP of TNA.
Yep.
And because of all of the wacky shenanigans involved in this match, I gave this match a 2.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 1 out of 10. I didn't care for it.
Now, as the show ends, I do have a very important question. And this is a very important question. Since Erik Watts is no longer in power, does that mean it's okay to pirate the shows?
I'd say so.
I don't see any reason why not. So it gives us an overall match quality rating this week of a 4.0. Overall enjoyment, I generally enjoyed this show. I gave it a 6.0 out of 10 because even though the show did fall off a cliff after the first 35 minutes, it did not fall off the cliff to the degree that I was fearing, and those first 35 minutes made me still enjoy the show by the end. Future build, if it wasn't for Terry Funk, I wouldn't be looking forward to anything next week. 2.0 out of 10. As mentioned before, Jeff Jarrett is never, ever going to wrestle Mike Tenay. And even if they did, no one on the planet would give a fuck. And no one on the planet does give a fuck about the never-ending Jeff Jarrett-Mike Tenay feud, giving us an overall rating of a 4.0 out of 10.
Which, oddly enough, is one of the better TNA ratings you've had recently.
We are officially out of January. We are 7 months left in this hellhole that is total nonstop action. Any final thoughts you have on this show?
Thank God January is over with. Can we get to something better? Oh, wait, I forgot. I watched next week's show. Can we just skip next week's show and just go straight to the World's X Cup show, the America's X Cup between Team AAA and TNA?
Nope. All right. So that is going to do it for this week's here show. Do want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
I guess.